Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We know people are just coming in the door, so we're going to give everyone a chance to get situated. Please make sure your cameras are on and your mics are off. But welcome to the 2022 FOLA Festival. This is going to be the first of 3 virtual festival activities. One of our signature events, as it were, of the Prince Georgians Arts and Humanities Council 40th anniversary celebration. Happy National Poetry Month, everyone. My name is Sister Joy. I'm the Poet Laureate of Prince George's County, Maryland. And as Poet Laureate, I am absolutely honored to present these FOLA events. As the Office of the Poet Laureate, well, we lead the efforts to bring poetry and other literary and cultural programs and activities to the fore, right here in Prince George's County. But of course, since we're doing programs virtually, we have programs being seen around the world. So we're excited about that. You'll be hearing many things about signature events because this, as I stated, is our 40th anniversary. But we want to make sure that everyone understands that there are many events happening throughout the year. 2022 is a banner year for the Arts Council, not the least of which one of the events is the publication of the first ever FOLA Festival. The first ever poetry anthology. So we want to make sure that everyone sees that it is an it's an anthology that celebrates everyone who dares to put a pen to page and submit their poetry to the commission, to the Arts Council. Now, excuse me one second. Oh, dear. Okay, all is well, all is well. We want to make sure that everyone understands that our celebration is recognized throughout the county. And today we are very honored to welcome the Prince George's Arts Council, the board chair. Yes, I'm speaking of our board chair, who is none other than Yvette Caldwell. And Ms. Caldwell, do you have some remarks? First of all, welcome to this year's festival, our FOLA. And I understand that we appreciate that you took time to be with us today. Do you have some remarks that you'd care to offer as we open our celebration? Welcome, Ms. Caldwell, Chair Board Caldwell.
Good morning, and thank you, Sister Joy. I'm so excited to be here. Happy National Poetry Month to everybody. This is so exciting. I'd like to bring greetings to the panelists and the participants. As the chair of the Prince George's Arts and Humanities Council, I want to give a special thanks to Sister Joy, our inaugural Prince George's County Laureate, for such exciting workshops for the Festival of Literary Arts this year, and who has done so for the past 3 years. So Sister Joy, we appreciate all of your dedication and hard work to the program. As Sister Joy mentioned, on December 4th, 1981, Prince George's County Arts and Humanities Council turned 40 years old. FOLA is the second in a series of 40th year anniversary signature events that are going to be happening throughout the year, celebrating various aspects of PGHC's programs over the years. And they're going to showcase a very rich diversity of artistic expression and cultural aspects right here in our own Prince George's County. The first event occurred last month, where PGHC partnered with Bowie State University, which is where I spend a lot of my time. Love Bowie State University, to bring over 100 people, including 45 BSU students, to see a Bowie State University junior student, Miles Frost, who is starring in MJ the Musical. So if you haven't had an opportunity to get up to New York to see our own Miles Frost in MJ the Musical, go and celebrate Miles. He's fantastic. And this was just, he was so excited to see representatives and people from his own community travel up to New York to see him in MJ the musical. And thank you to the Arts Council for recognizing this wonderful opportunity to celebrate our own. Along with FOLA is the much anticipated poetry anthology, which Sister Joy is celebrating, which she mentioned, so yay on that. But there will be a host of other events in the inaugural Prince George's County-wide Film Festival and Destination Prince George's County. That's also going to be happening. And we will be presenting a creative placemaking public art block party in September. So put that on your calendar. Yes, we're doing a lot of things. And then finally, we're going to have a multicultural arts festival in October. And please save the date for December 10th, where we're going to be celebrating our 40th anniversary at a Prince George's Got Talent Gala and the PGCC Center of the Performing Arts. So we've got a lot of things going on, and welcome today. Have a wonderful series of events. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair Caldwell. And today's kickoff is a conversation, a literary conversation, and it's titled A Collaborative Literary Conversation. It is presented in partnership with the Furious Flower Poetry Center, the Prince George's Memorial Library System, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and the Nora Roberts Foundation. Now, you'll hear about today's panelists shortly, but first, we want you to know that this festival, today's event, is one of 3 virtual events being presented this weekend. Tomorrow, Saturday the 23rd, we will be presenting Health and Healing Through Poetry and Art. And that'll be from 1 until 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time with poet and founder of the Inkwell and Cayenne Ink Healing in the Pen, Dynasta, Miss Cayenne Thomas, also owner of Ashes Rising Counseling Services, LLC. Also, Dr. Beverly Sargent, PhD, and award-winning poet and writing instructor and workshop facilitator, Carolyn Joyner. That promises to be a very exciting seminar. Then we will close this year's FOLA on Sunday, the 24th, with Books for Black Youth, Ensuring a Bright Future. And that will be from 3 until 4:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time with Dr. Tony Medina of Howard University, with Prince George's County 2022 Youth Poet Laureate Imani West, also award-winning children's book author Carolyn Brewer, and she's also a literacy activist, and former director and CEO of the Hurston Wright Foundation, Clyde McIlvaine. Well, we hope you'll join us for all 3, but we're happy to have you with us here today. Now, the Office of the Poet Laureate, which functions through the Prince George's Arts and Humanities Council, expresses our deepest appreciation for this opportunity to present programs of this caliber, which the content for the poets and the residents of Prince George's County are excellent. You will not find better anywhere. And now that we're operating in a virtual mode, we're not just offering these programs for Prince Georgians, we're offering them for poets and poetry lovers everywhere. We want to thank our guests, all of you who are joining us here today. Each of you is invited to participate. First, please tell us in the Zoom chat where you're joining us from. And so this is something that I hope everyone will right now go into the chat, type your name and the city and state where you're joining us from. And if you're joining us from international connection, then let us know where in the world you're joining us from. So, and of course, we will be accepting questions and comments in the chat throughout today's presentation. So we want this to be an interactive conversation. Okay, well, let's get the forum underway. Today's forum will have two parts. The panelists for this first discussion will be about the Furious Flower Poetry Center. And our presenters, as previously mentioned, are Dr. Joanne Gabin, who is the founder and executive director of the Furious Flower Poetry Center, the nation's first academic center for Black poetry. She is also a professor of English at James Madison University, where Furious Flower Poetry Center is located. A little bit of information: she is author of Sterling A. Brown, Building the Black Aesthetic Tradition, and a children's book, I Bet She Called Me Sugar Plum. She is also the editor of The Furious Flowering of African American Poetry, Furious Flower. Also African American poetry from the Black arts movement to the present. Mourning Katrina, a poetic response to tragedy. Shaping Memories, Reflections of African American Women Writers. And Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry, along with co-editor Lauren K. Aileen. Now, recently, a building at James Madison University, Joanne V. and Alexander Gabin Hall, was named in honor of her and her husband for their outstanding contributions to the university and the community. Let's give a rousing round of applause in congratulations for all that she has given, and certainly for the naming of the building at James Madison University. Thank you very much, Dr. Gabin, for all you continue to give. Now, our second panelist for this morning's first session will be Professor Lauren Aileen, who is the Assistant Director of the Furious Flower Poetry Center. Lauren Aileen was born and raised in the Twin Island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. She is the author of Difficult Fruit, Peepal Tree Press, 2014, and Honeyfish, New Issues in the US and Peepal Tree in the UK, and that was 2019. Which, by the way, won the 2018 Green Rose Prize. Now, Aileen's work is a poetics of witness. Her poems are lyric and narrative movements toward clarity of vision, addressing violence and loss. Aileen exposes social injustices and the veiled power structures that perpetrate them. I'd like to share this quote that former Poet Laureate of the United States, Tracy K. Smith, offered about Lauren Aileen. She says, Lauren K. Aileen says to all Black bodies slain by hatred and militarized fear, nothing I say will save you, but how can I say nothing? Again, that was Tracy K. Smith, Poet Laureate of the United States of America. Now, Dr. Gabin and Assistant Director Aileen, welcome to the Prince Georgians Arts and Humanities Council, FOLA. What would you share with us about Furious Flower, about your seminal literary publication, The Fight and the Fiddle, about Furious Flower's recent anthology, and the next Furious Flower Poetry Center Conference? Dr. Gabin and Professor Aileen.
Thank you, Sister Joy, and congratulations on 40 years. It is wonderful to be on this program to celebrate with you. And I just want to say that I am so impressed with the poetry a day series that you've been doing. I read them every day.
Thank you.
Religiously. I enjoy them so much. But we've had a long journey at Furious Flower. This is our 27th year, going on 28 years of Furious Flower, starting in 1994 when we did the first Furious Flower conference, which I thought was going to be the only one. But as the universe would have it, we did the second one in 2004. And then after that conference, we became a center, a brick and mortar center. And we have been programming around poetry ever since 2005. So, and then we had the third Furious Flower Conference in 2014. And what we do at Furious Flower is we support Black poetry. We support our Black poets by educating the world about their work, about celebrating them and preserving their work. Recently, we were fortunate to get a Mellon grant for $2 million, along with the JMU libraries, to develop and make accessible the archive that we have at James Madison University. So we've come a long way, baby, I tell you, from 1994 to the present. And I have been so fortunate to attract wonderful people to Furious Flower who help with programming. We do readings. We have done legacy seminars honoring wonderful people like Lucille Clifton, Sonia Sanchez, Yusuf Kamanyaka, and Nikki Giovanni, and most recently, Haki Matabuti. We have done collegiate summits. I remember Tony Medina brought groups of students from Howard to our collegiate summit several years ago. We've done those every other year. We have a children's poetry camp because we really believe in growing poets.
Wonderful.
We also, because of the joining of Lauren Aileen to our Furious Flower Poetry Center, we now have a really respectable online journal, and she's going to talk about that a little bit. We are also fortunate to be in a position to have an advisory board, and the advisory board has been of such support to us in raising money. We have an endowed fund for Furious Flower so that we know Furious Flower has the funds to go on into the future. We are looking forward to many decades of Furious Flower going forward. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Lauren just to talk a little bit more about who we are.
Oh, wonderful.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I've had the pleasure of working at Fierce Flower since 2016. Let me tell y'all, life is great with Dr. Joanne Gavin as a mentor and a boss. And just some of the things that we've been able to do together that I've sort of inherited as part of the center, and also the initiatives I've been able to sort of do on my own. And so to sort of just talk about those, we have one of my favorite programs that we do that has been ongoing is the Legacy Seminar, right? There's not anything else that I know of where poets, elementary school teachers of poetry, high school teachers of poetry, college teachers of poetry, and teachers of teachers, right? Educators, education professors are in the same space, thinking together about not only what these poets mean and what their work has contributed, but also what are the innovative ways we might take that work back to the classroom? How might we make connection at all of those different levels and just connect with each other as, like, for a second, not being teachers in the front of the room, but also being students, right? And learning from other folks who have studied the poet, hearing from the poet themselves. Usually the poet is with us for that whole week, and so there's something energizing for teachers, I think, when they're so close to the subject of their teaching. And so that's what we hope to do. Again, really empower, excite, ignite, inspire all of these folks to then take the work and the word of Black poetry back into their communities, back into their classrooms, and send the next generation to us on fire already, right? In terms of things that I've sort of been able to do, as Dr. Gavin mentioned, the Fight in the Fiddle, I really felt that one of the things we needed was a journal, but there's so many literary journals. So I was really thinking, maybe not initially, but again, Dr. Gavin was like, I don't know if we can do the whole thing, but what's a little thing, right? And again, because we are a small staff, that's changing with Mellon, but thinking about what would be a really succinct and yet impactful contribution to the literary landscape. And so the Fight in the Fiddle focuses on one Black poet every quarter. And each issue has original poetry, of course, from the poet. It also has a writing prompt inspired by that poet's work. There is a transcribed long interview, in-depth interview that I conduct with that poet when they come to visit campus. And so, you know, there's all the questions I ever wanted to ask them, but I also think that other folks might be interested in. And it's just, again, an opportunity to get insight into this writer's practice, their life, their work, their reading, etc., etc. And the last thing that I'm really excited about and proud of is I do solicit a scholarly contribution, because I do think that there's also sometimes, and again, this is part of the legacy, right? Because the first Fierce Flower anthology was all about getting critical language to talk about Black poetry that wasn't simply rooted in it's cool and right, but cultural, but actually there is academic, scholarly, literary, critical merit to the work that's being done. And so how do we support that? How do we generate that? I thought was simply to put it as part of the journal. So alongside the new work, alongside the conversation, and then hopefully in the inspiration with the prompt, every quarter, one poet, so it's very digestible. I've heard that folks use it in teaching in classes, which is my dream, and so that has been very exciting. And I recently received an NEA grant for the work of the Fight in the Fiddle, so that's wonderful. I'm thinking about expanding those poets to thinking about Black in a more global sense, so that's forthcoming in the next volume over the next year. And so yeah, as you see, I'm excited. I love all the work that we do here. And I'm always just sort of wonderfully excited to tell the story of what we do. And you know, I think the thing that Fierce Flower was born of, again, in Dr. Gavin's vision, and that I hope to continue as the incoming director, is really to think about what are the needs to support Black poets and to support the production of Black poetry in this country in this moment, and how might the center speak to that? And so I think that's an evolving question, and you know, we're again fortunate to both have been given this money to make our archives accessible, and so we are tending to our legacy, we are tending to the past, but part of the grant is also to think about how might we innovate within those archives to tend to our future, to tend to what's ahead. And so that's where we are, and that's what we're doing. And I'm going to stop talking for a bit and hand it back to Dr. Gavin.
That's a good segue to our
that's
latest
what I wanted
anthology, which is Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry. It's probably the visual is a little wonky because of the background, but we think it's a beautiful book, put out in 2020 by Northwestern University Press. And we're proud of this book because it has more than 100 newer, younger poets. So the future looks so bright. And I'll just read off a few names. Tiana Clark, Denise Smith, all right, Doriel Harris, Ross Gay, Terrence Hayes, Major Jackson, Glennis Redmond, Tony Medina, John Murillo, and Tracy K. Smith. These are names, many of them you know, and some of the names in here are emerging poets have just started writing. We have in here also Jericho Brown that just won the Pulitzer for his poetry, The Tradition, that wonderful, wonderful book. And we just had a conversation with him recently. And I'm also happy to see Monifa Love and Poet Glover here. They both have been part of Furious Flower. They've been to Furious Flower events, and we broaden, the family, and we embrace everyone. And that's the wonderful thing about what we do at Furious Flower. There are no cliques, and there's no special sections for this ideology or that one, because we see poetry, and especially Black poetry, as a wonderful continuum. And so I am going to be so happy to welcome Sister Joy to the 2024 conference. You have to be there.
I absolutely must.
Or they say, as I was a little girl, you have to be there or be square.
Well, I wouldn't want to be square. So I look forward to that. Now, while we're sharing this wonderful information about Furious Flower, I would like for either of you to please put in the Zoom chat, number one, the link for the Furious Flower Poetry Center. Number two, the link for the anthology, how to get it. Number three, the information about your upcoming conference that you just mentioned. So those three links, and the link for the Furious Flower, for the Fight in the Fiddle. So there's 4 links we need to see in the Zoom chat so that all of our guests can get better connected with the Furious Flower Poetry Center. So whichever of you wishes to post those links.
It's happening right now.
That would be Lauren. That would be Lauren. Thank God for people who are younger who can do all of this stuff.
Wonderful, thank you.
We are really so happy. We just hired a communication marketing specialist who will help us with that. It is our goal to make Furious Flower known throughout the world. And now we have the platforms to do that.
Yes.
And we have the encouragement from the library and the archive to do that as well. So it's a dream of mine. As Lauren mentioned, I will be retiring at the end of the summer.
Oh, no, not before I get there.
No. But you know what? If as Sterling Brown would say, God willing, and the creek don't rise, I will be there in 2024. So I don't expect to be any other place but supporting Lauren as she does this particular conference. So it is my hope that I will be there to greet you, Sister Joy, and to welcome Monifa Love back to Harrisonburg.
Yes. Well, we look forward to that. Is there? Can we get a preview? Is there a theme that you've already settled on?
We're working on it. The conference is in 2024 in September, and so we'll start letting that out as soon as it's solidified. We don't have it quite together yet. This is Joy trying to get the exclusive scoop.
Yes, Shirley absolutely was, but that's okay. I'll stay tuned because we want to make sure that all Prince Georgians know about the Furious Flower. I mean, this is a national resource right here in our backyard. And too many people that I've spoken with when I raised, the topic of Furious Flower, and they said, send me some information about that. And so it let me know that we need to ensure that Prince Georgians know about this resource that people from around the country are clamoring to. That, as you said, there are many who have already been within your ranks, and we're thrilled. I heard you mention the first name that you mentioned from the anthology, Dr. Gavin, was Keona Clark, and she is a phenomenal visual artist here in Prince George's County, doing great things. So I'm thrilled to hear that she also has a poem in that anthology, which after you and I spoke, I purchased my copy of the anthology. So I have my
Good.
copy, and I'll be looking for Keona's poem and giving her a heads up to, hey, atta girl, way to go. Okay. So, but thank you so much for sharing what you already have. We want to make sure that if there are any questions that our guests, please post your questions in the Zoom chat. In addition to, of course, letting us know where you're joining us from, but we want to have a dialogue with these wonderful young spirits who are creating wonderful opportunities for poets and poetry lovers. And one of the things that I requested, and I hope everybody paid attention to this, is that each panelist for today's forum will share a poem of theirs. So while we're waiting for any comments that may come into the Zoom chat, I'm going to ask Dr. Gavin to share a poem, and then we'll have a poem from Professor Aileen. Dr. Gavin, what would you share with us today?
Well, I did not pull out one of my poems, but I wanted to share a poem by Gwendolyn Brooks, who is the matriarch of Furious Flower.
Oh, I have that wonderful book.
Blacks. She, as you know, and I want your listeners to know that it was because of Gwendolyn Brooks that Furious Flower even exists. In fact, the name Furious Flower comes from one of her poems.
Yes.
The Second Sermon in the Warpland. And it is that poem that inspired me to turn what was going to be a single reading by Gwendolyn Brooks into a conference. And the rest is history. So she inspired that first conference, and she inspires all of Furious Flower and will in perpetuity. Yes. The second conference was dedicated to Amir Baraka and Sonia Sanchez, and the third one to Rita Dove.
Oh, okay.
So I want to honor them as well, but always Gwendolyn Brooks will be the person that we turn to think about the spirit of Furious Flower. Now, I was thinking, and maybe I'll read another poem a little bit later, but I went to the very last poem for some reason. I just said, you know, we have been through 2 years of pandemic. We are still doing virtual poetry readings because of the pandemic. And I was thinking, what would Gwendolyn Brooks say to inspire all of us to maintain, to take care of ourselves, to see ourselves as a whole, even though we are all infirm. So the last poem that she read at Furious Flower, outside of We Real Cool, because everybody asked for that poem, of course. That's the poem that she's known for. But she wanted to end with this poem called Infirm. It's a very short poem, but to me it has a lot of meaning, especially here. And as we go through loss and sadness and sickness, but as we always come out on the other side, seeing the joy that is in life, seeing the beauty. Infirm. Everybody here is infirm. Everybody here is infirm. Oh, mend me, Lord. Today, I say to them, Lord, look, I am beautiful. Beautiful with my wing that is wounded, my eye that is bonded, my ear not funded, or my walk all a wobble. I am enough to be beautiful. You are beautiful too. So I give that to you as a kind of meditation from Gwendolyn Brooks.
How very, very beautiful indeed, and very appropriate. Thank you, Dr. Gavin, for offering that. Certainly setting the foundation for today's FOLA. I appreciate that. Okay, and Professor Aileen, what would you share by way of your first poem of the day?
The first one. I always sort of let the environment and the vibe, call me a vibe poet, tell me what I'm gonna read. And this poem had been sort of in the background, and then when Dr. Gavin said inform, and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna read. So I'm actually gonna read from my first book.
Which is titled? Give us
It's
the title.
difficult fruit, and the poem is called "The X-Ray," and it is an ars poetica of sorts, right? I think it started out being literally about I was arm wrestling. I wound up in the ER, and but also it kind of became about I think about this process of writing. The X-Ray. I feared and revered it. This black and white portrait pinned calmly against the harsh fluorescent glow. The cryptic stare of my doctor in her white lab coat, her ballpoint pen briskly outlining the skeleton of my wrist, the fragmented carpals, the rivers of dark separating the tiny pieces of the metacarpals, the 4 long fingers, their bony white columns, the nebulous lumps of each knuckle speed bumps on a curving road, the comparative stub of the thumb, the thick layers of adipose transformed into a barely visible grayness. It did not apologize or demur or cower at our scrutiny. It dared us even to look deeper, to pick each tiny layer apart, dig through the thick cartilage, the grain of ligaments, the ivory-colored coating, to lay bare the marrow, the blue veins, the dark arteries and thin capillaries rich with plasma and blood cells on their journeys to and from the heart. I have longed to live like this, to be held up to the light, naked beneath any official stare, found whole.
Okay, thank you. We never know what poems are going to be presented when you ask someone to share. That was quite, now what made you share that poem? That's very telling. Tell us about that.
I was thinking again of the idea of, actually I was kind of really riffing off of Joanne's, infirm and also towards healing. But I was thinking about, this poetry month. And the question we sort of thought we would talk about a little bit is why poetry and what can poetry do, right? And I feel like that poem, it's so internal, like literally in terms of what it's looking like, but it's also thinking about, what does a poem allow us to do, right? How can poetry be a mirror? How can poetry be a looking and seeing space where we look beyond what we're given, right?
Yes.
And see what's really at the root, at the heart, at the marrow of things. So that's...
Well, actually, how about you answer that very question? What is it that poetry allows you to do and that you would offer to potential, persons who maybe never picked up that pen before?
I would say that especially after all of these years of writing, that what poetry continues to offer me is a way to articulate myself to myself.
To yourself. Okay. Yourself.
I just did a virtual residency. I was telling the students, I come to the page like this, right, with a lot of things doing that. And so finding the language and the words to put around it, and and that clarity, of course, I forget, I think it's Quasimodo who said, the best work articulates, presents something that the writer thinks is personal, but that the reader recognizes as her own.
Yes.
Right. And so in finding the right words, in finding the exact shape of that feeling in language, right? Because again, we're human beings. We have the feelings, we have the thoughts, but our job as writers is to give that stuff language that is precise and accurate and resonant. And so if we do that job well, we're creating a linguistic pathway to empathy, right? You can feel what I am feeling because I have given you the words to do that.
Exactly.
So that's the goal. It doesn't always happen, but it's the goal.
That's the goal. Yes. Well, certainly we perceive that we are the species that has the ability to convey our feelings, our thoughts, our views, more so than any other. We don't know because we're not other entities or life forms, but perhaps others have that ability that we're simply not tapped into. But as Homo sapiens, as from the cave time, we have, whether it's a handprint on the cave wall or that message that the painter creates, the drum that sends the signal that conveys the connection to a homeland, but we do it through poetry. And it is so beautiful when we feel that connection has been made. It is satisfying beyond belief for us poets. And we would like to think that that information has been conveyed in a meaningful way that is more than just facts.
And I have a good example of that. My first step on this path called poetry happened because of Sterling A. Brown, wonderful Washington, D.C. poet who has been given to the world.
Yes.
And the universe, of course. And it was Sterling Brown who convinced me that you really could talk to someone else through your words. I was in a really difficult situation of grieving my mother and was wondering, how would I ever get through the grief process? And I read the poem, Sister Lou.
Oh, I love
that poem.
Yes,
by Sterling Brown.
Oh, yes.
And Sterling Brown talks about a woman sitting at the bedside of a friend and trying to give that friend comfort as she moves from this earth to the next life.
Yes.
And it was so comforting to me to hear him use the diction of the Bible, to hear him use these soothing words, and to hear him put these words into the mouth of a woman. I said, I have to meet this man. I have to know this man. And I decided in 1971 that I was going to do my dissertation on Sterling Brown. And I'm speaking on the side of the reader, not the side of the poet. And Sterling Brown opened up a whole new world for me because he had that empathy.
Yeah.
And he had a way to communicate it.
Oh,
and so,
yes.
After that, poets like Gwendolyn Brooks and Lucille Clifton and Sonia Sanchez and Maya Angelou, so many others, a world opened up for me that I wasn't aware of. And even though I'd been through college, but when I went to college, we weren't teaching Black poetry, unfortunately. It took my generation who opened these PWIs, these public institutions, to bring Black studies into these walls, and so I'm very happy to have done that. But I tell you, Sterling Brown was for me an amazing inspiration.
As he closed out that poem, take your time, sister. Take your
blessed time.
it. Yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Blessed. That poem just did it for me as well. I totally know what you're saying. And Sterling is, of course, one of the greats that, because poetry should convey culture. And that's what his poetry does. If no other poet does it, his poetry conveys culture.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I don't see any questions or comments in the Zoom chat. So we have an audience of listeners, and I won't hold it against them. I was
well, there was one question, and I wanted to clarify. One person said she couldn't find infirmed. It's not infirmed, it's infirm, and it's in Blacks, which interestingly enough was a book published by the David Company, Chicago, Illinois. Gwendolyn Brooks decided after leaving HarperCollins that she would only publish through Black presses. And she started publishing Broadside Press. She published with Third World Press. So she put her money where her mouth was. She put her products, her talent, where she believed that there would be a perspective that she could follow and that she could be proud of. So, I think all of that I gained from Gwendolyn Brooks. I wanted to have a conference that didn't have to be affirmed by those on the outside. I wanted a conference that we would put together as Black people to honor Black people, to show the talent of Black people. And that's what Furious Flower has become.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Gavin, we do have a question, actually two, and I'm thinking that Angela Brown's question was about the book that you just held up, which is Blacks by Gwendolyn Brooks. And the second question is the conference open to unpublished writers?
Oh, the conference is for the conference, you can just attend the conference, absolutely. And again, as we shape out what the call for submissions are, what the call for papers will be, you'll see the opportunities to submit at that moment, whether it's for a panel or a reading or a conversation. But certainly as attendees, everybody can come.
Can you talk about the conference? Is it an hour conference? Is it a day conference? Is it a weekend conference?
I'm gonna let Dr. Gavin. This is her baby.
I'm being the devil's advocate here because I know, but I want our guests to get an inkling. So, Dr. Gavin.
Yeah, when you come to Harrisonburg, Virginia, if we get you down here, we're not going to let you go in a day. You are going to be with us from Thursday until Sunday morning. And we have, it's really like a festival.
Yeah.
We not only have panels and presentations, readings with hundreds of people. Our first conference, we had audiences of 1,300 people at every reading. So, that's really odd for poets. Poets,
Yes.
If they get 30 or 40 people listening to them, they're very happy. But these poets were blown away when they saw thousands of people in the audience listening to them.
Yeah.
So no, it's usually a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and leaving on Sunday. So it's a full conference and festival combined. And Lauren will have the opportunity to shape this, but usually it has music. Our last conference in 2014 featured Ravi Coltrane, the son of John Coltrane. I was blown away. It also featured the Morgan State University choir.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And so there's music, there's art, there's dancing. So it's a full conference. We call it a conference, but it's a full gathering of poets who are celebrating one another and celebrating Black poetry in the world.
And the dates again for the upcoming conference are?
The last
dates?
weekend in September 24.
Okay,
September of
okay.
2024.
September of 2024. So we know we have some time. Folks can start planning their calendars, their fall calendars around the Furious Flower Poetry Center conference. I won't call it a festival, conference. So thank you so
September
much.
26, 27, 28.
Okay, okay. So I'll have to make sure that when I get my appointment book for that year, that's going to be one of the first things in there. And I'm looking forward to being greeted by both of you. I'm putting in my bid now. Oh, thank you so very much. Can we get one more poem from each of you before we transition to our second panel for today? Dr. Gavin and
Well, I will go first and let our poet in residence. I love to turn to Lauren as our poet in residence because she's such a wonderful poet. And
yes.
And in fact, one of the last trips that I took before this pandemic really shut us down was to LA, Los Angeles, where she was a finalist for the NAACP Image Award.
Ooh.
So, I'm so proud of her and she knows
yes.
that.
Yes.
But I do want to read.
You see, it's a love fest at this employment agency place that we were here. We just love
and
one
that's
each other
a very
all day
good
long.
thing. That's a very good thing.
Well, it is something. I think women have to model that. We are a community, and I just recently I did something for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the theme was Our Sister's Keeper. And in my dealings, this is off topic a little bit, but in my dealings, I feel that we are our sister's keeper and we are our brother's keeper.
Yeah.
And I suppose in that spirit, I chose this next poem by one of the people in our book, Furious Flowers, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry. And we've been using this poem as a kind of theme for this past year because we've been in the mode of building.
Yeah.
And that's what I consider myself, a builder. So as I leave this position, I leave the building that I've built in good hands.
Yes.
So this is by Fred Joyner, wonderful poet who did so much work in the Washington, D.C. area.
Yes, I know Fred well.
Yes, and so I want to honor him by reading his poem instead of trying to read one of mine. It's called To the Builders. Our hands speak the language of artifacts. Under a Saturday sun, we obey the call of our hands. The burn of builders aching in your palms. The breath of storytellers stirring in mine. We build to leave the world different than how we enter. Leave evidence. A syllable is a brick. A single inked word on a page is a monument in face of a white horizon meant to erase us.
Okay. Fred Joyner. Yes.
Fred Joyner. To the Builders. And I love that poem because we have so much going on in our country at this point, trying to erase the culture and contribution of Black people in literature, in history, you name it. Just a side note, I just read a disturbing story about Montpelier, the Montpelier Foundation. They're trying to decide what the Black descendants of Montpelier have to say. And so they want to choose these people. They don't want an independent group talking about their history. This is the pattern that
Yeah.
we see ourselves in. And I mentioned Montpelier because I'm at James Madison University. Montpelier was the plantation that James Madison owned. And he owned 300 slaves, enslaved people. And the descendants of those people say, we have a story to tell.
Yes.
And there's a foundation out there trying to prevent them from telling the story.
Yeah.
And I want you all to hear that we have people now rising up saying, I'm going to be my own storyteller.
Yes.
You're not going to tell my story. And you're not, under the guise of critical race theory, change the truth into a lie.
Yes.
So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dr. Gavin, and you said it well. Thank you so much. Okay, and Professor Aileen, would you care to close out today's session, this first session?
I'm happy to. I was a little torn, but I think I'm gonna with this poem because I know it's one of Joanne's favorites, so I'm gonna read it for her. But also, again, in the spirit of what we said, this idea of, for me, writing is a space of transformation. It doesn't only, and I don't mean like sort of just something passive on the page, which is important, but also how I see and interact with the world. So the story behind this poem, it's actually part of a pair of poems. I was at a writing workshop in at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, and the workshop leader said, you know, go out on the balcony, look around, see something, and, you know, be inspired to write. And so I looked out, and there was a fish in the sky because it was a weather vane. And I was like, this poor fish. So the first poem I wrote was an elegy to the fish as weather vane, you know, saying poor fishy up in the sky, like out of place, far from home. But that image haunted me, and that poem haunted me as an unsatisfactory way to end and to wholly hold the experience of this poor metal fish who was not thinking about me at all. Let's just make it very clear. And so I went back to the page, and what came was the ode to the fish as weather vane. So that's what I'm going to read for you, of course, at the Fine Arts Work Center in Massachusetts. You were built for a different blue, for oceans, rivers, clear complexes of glass, but here you are, hoisted among the clouds, neighbor to the stars, your fins redefining wings. Say flight. Say sky is ocean by another name. Say biology is one order of being, but imagination is another. How you undo cliché with your unlikely grace, slip through the clumsy nets limits would knit around your bizarre existence. Token, they whisper, freak. But how you withstand the fickle transformations of weather, read the revolution wind scripts onto your body, learn to move in its midst, say, evolve. Say, the first order of being is survival. Say, these gills will become lungs and testify. Say, thrive in any element and name it.
Beautiful.
Possible.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
Thank you so very much. Well, I want to thank both Dr. Gavin, Dr. Joanne Gavin, and Professor Lauren Aileen for lighting up the mic with your wonderful poetry and poetry selections, but also for sharing such poignant information about the powerful and wonderful Furious Flower Poetry Center that now all Prince Georgians who were so inclined to tune in today, and I noted that we also had at least a very few international visitors. I see Julian Matthews on. Hey, Julian. I'm very happy to see some of the poets that have been traveling with me. And certainly we have from Florida, Dr. Francis Hicks. we have wonderful guests that are with us. I see hello from Malaysia, Julian, thank you so much. Thank you all for this wonderful exchange that Dr. Gavin and Professor Lauren Aileen offered us today. And today's session was recorded, so you'll be able to share this once you get the link with persons who perhaps the schedule just did not permit them to join us. But thank you all so very much. Okay, well now we will transition to our second set for the day. Good day, Dr. Gavin. Good day, Professor Aileen. We'll see you next time. Okay. We now have our second set of this wonderful celebration of FOLA, Festival of Literary Arts, that is being presented, our collaborative literary conversation. Now will feature Professor Hoke S. Glover III, also known throughout Prince George's County and the metropolitan area in general as Brother Yao. He is a professor of creative writing in the Department of Language, Literature, and Cultural Studies at Bowie State University. Brother Yao is a poet and nonfiction writer living in Lanham, Maryland. He has, well, his work has been published in Crab Orchard Review, African American Review, Plowshares, Beltway Quarterly, and other journals. His second book of poetry, One Shoe Marching Toward Heaven, was published by Africa World Press in the summer of 2020. He is currently working on a book of essays called The Wuhan Soundtrack, based on his experience living in Wuhan, China. He has completed a manuscript titled Crazy as Hell, the best little book on Black history, which is slated to be published in the fall of 2022. Now, our second panelist for this second set will be Dr. Monifa Love, who is the Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Bowie State University. And she is a professor in the Bowie State University Department of Language, Literature, and Cultural Studies as well. Now, Love Asante is a graduate of Princeton University and the Florida State University, where she matriculated as a McKnight Doctoral Fellow and as an associate of the great philosopher and oppression theorist, William R. Jones. Love Asante is the author of 2 collections of poetry, Provisions, 1989, and Dreaming Underground, 2003, Naomi Long Madgett Award winner. She is, well, she works with her husband, Nana Kweku Kar Asante, on development projects in Ghana, West Africa. Welcome, 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 Dr. Love and Professor Glover.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and let's see, I heard Dr. Love, is Professor Glover with us?
Oh yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, okay. So,
Thanks for having me.
absolutely. Now, Bowie State University is one of Prince George's County's fine HBCUs. And of course, we're hearing a lot about HBCUs in the press and in the media today. Please, would you introduce our guest to the Bowie State University Literary Arts Program? And I would say to our audience, we really do want this to be an interactive conversation. So please post your comments and questions in the Zoom as Dr. Love and Professor Glover share about poetry and the opportunity to pursue literary academic training at Bowie State University, and how students can engage in, well, in social literary programs and conversations at Bowie State University. Dr. Love, Professor Glover.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you want to start, or how would you like to go?
You first, Monifa.
All right, thank you so much. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to say this in front of Dr. Gavin. Furious Flower is a beacon. 1994 changed my life. It just changed my life. Though I have not, it's been interesting. There've been a variety of personal circumstances where I have not been able to be at Furious Flower as much as I have wanted to. But to say that it was just life-changing. And the reason it was life-changing is that I felt genuinely there was a seat at the table for everyone. And this is an unusual thing. There was, as we've been working to sort out the meaning of poetry personally and culturally, sometimes we can segregate one another into these camps. This is a spoken word person, this person's on the page, this person does this one's a community poet. And at Furious Flower in 1994, there was just a loving embrace, and being able to see that poetry can be many things to many people, that it doesn't matter the form or the direction or the approach, that there's still a capacity, as Sister Lauren was saying, for resonance, and that resonance gets into your blood and lives with you. So thank you so much for that. It really has influenced how I've thought about poetry education and literary arts education. And personally, a student doesn't have to be in a creative writing course per se to have exposure to poetry. Everywhere that I teach, poetry lives. Everywhere I teach, they have the opportunity to write and explore themselves as poets. And there's a line from Queen Brooks's important poem about the time cracks into furious flower, lifts its face all unashamed and sways in wicked grace. And that for me is the charge for literary arts education, that students feel that their time cracks open, that the work they do helps open our time, and that what emerges from there is a fantastic flowering, that in the unashamed nature is like you're writing what you write, uplifting, uplifted, feeling powerful, beautiful, despite whatever anybody else or any other group may think or feel. So again, Furious Flower is not incidental to me. It is a poem. Dr. Gavin is a poem in the way that it stays with you in your heart and circulates in that blood. And that's my aspiration as a creative writing instructor, is largely to create circumstances so that the writer blossoms on their own terms, guided by certain principles of what the fantastic mode of poetry offers. I mean, I feel about poetry like being in church. It is so vast. It is so powerful. It taps into people's personal power and our cultural power in ways, to me, like nothing else. As a poet, you get to dance on the page, you get to be a visual artist, you get to be a musician, you get to be a spokesperson, you get to be all of these things and yourself at the same time. So I know that there's probably a tidier answer to the question raised about literary arts education at Bowie State University. But if you think, Bowie State is located on a former plantation. And there is a train that goes by. You know, it's headed north. So you have in the location itself, this mix of the past and the future and place, being on the move, that is inspiring. It's also a very natural environment. And so when I have coordinated the program in the past, the aim was to like really lean into all those things so that if a poet wanted to write about nature, there was a place for that person to write about flowers and trees, and nobody had anything to say about it, even though, you know, nation time is still with us, but there is a place for the person who wants to look at nature, who wants to look at history, who wants to talk about our future. So that's a long answer to, but it's just an enthusiastic response because our poets, I believe, help save us. They're not incidental. They are emotional, psychological, spiritual rescuers. And that's what I'm hoping to help cultivate in our students, the sense that they are here to help us save ourselves.
Thank you, pardon. Thank you, Dr. Love. That's what we want folks to understand, that the breadth of what is offered at Bowie State University. And you captured it beautifully, because there's not a silo into which you must fit yourself or your spirit. It is about the blossoming, as Furious Flower language would identify. But this experience that many, well, they feel intimidated or that they don't fit the mold. And the point is, there is not a mold. And that's what we want everyone to understand. There is so much empowerment available through poetry. And if you learn nothing else, you can lift your voice and be heard in your own truth. And that's what we want, everyone to have that experience. Professor Glover, what would you care to add to the conversation about Bowie State University and its offerings for the would-be poet, for the individual who seeking to broaden their awareness, and perhaps some of your personal journey?
Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is, it's an honor to, be able to listen to folks this morning.
Could you turn your volume up just a bit?
See if I can do that. Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, first I was just going to say it's an honor to be able to listen to Dr. Gavin. She's a legend. And I too was able to attend Furious Flower in 1994, and then I think I got there in 2004 too. And one of the things I'm excited about is power change. I think that's always important for anything that deals with Black folks, which is being able to transfer power from one generation to the next. So for me, that's one of the most exciting parts of being able to listen today. I think for me, what Bowie offers that's unique is, we're an HBCU. There are very few HBCUs in the country where you can study creative writing or study poetry. And then, I've always shared with Dr. Love, how happy I am to have an administrator like her that's at the HBCU, because that is probably even a distinction within itself too, which is an administrator who is an academic superstar, but also a creative writer, and then also a poet. So these are skill sets, which again, in this environment, though we may talk about the hostility of racism, the majority of African Americans who are successful reside in PWIs. Whereas those dynamics are very different at the HBCU. What you deal with at the HBCU is lack of resources, or yeah, again, I would say lack of resources. So at Bowie, I think the unique thing that we offer is, you know, the ability to synergize with Black consciousness at the root level. I mean, Black people are important to Black poetry. So I'd like to think that the mere fact that we operate and we teach and engage Black people all day, every day, in some ways shapes our art and gives us this advantage that we bring to, you know, the pursuit of poetry. For me, you know, I've been at Bowie about 15 years, and prior to, you know, teaching at Bowie, I owned a Black bookstore. And one of the things our bookstore did was engage poets in a very serious way. It's interesting too that, you know, the poem, Fred Joyner was actually an employee at Caribou Books. So it's like, there are always these weird Caribou connections when we start to talk about poets. Joel Diaz Porter, Reginald Dwayne Betts. I met Natasha Tarpley through Caribou Books. So I have this other weird sort of way that I didn't really engage poets and people like you and I. We know each other through the bookstore. And so part of my approach at Bowie has really been a business idea, which was to focus on how it is that you teach the craft of writing. Like, is there a Black way to do that? And there probably isn't. But at the same time, I think there's an oversight. You know, much of the English canon, or the way it is that creative writing is taught, is intricately related to what we get upset about, which is the idea of white supremacy. And the average English scholar is someone that's well-trained in that canon and well-trained in the oversights. So one of the things that I've learned, and I think it's the thing that we offer here at Bowie, if students come, is we try and center our study of poetry around metaphor. And so I think in the absence of colonialism, metaphor may be the real discipline that the poet should study. So I can be very complex about that idea. But again, for folks who would like to study at an HBCU and you're beginning to wonder, well, what's the difference or what are the advantages? The first one is, I would say, the people, because it is good for Black poetry to be around a lot of Black people. The HBCU should have that advantage. But the other thing I would say is that some of the work that we've done with metaphor, which is actually teaching poets or having poets do exercises, not simply that are rooted in their own expression, but much like a musician would play scales. Like, again, if you're a visual artists don't simply say whatever they want to say and express themselves. Visual artists are also required to render images that exist in the real world. They practice. Musicians, they play, but they also practice scales. That doesn't really exist in poetry. So I mean, if I look at a 10 or 20-year vision for what Bowie could do, perhaps African Americans can be innovative about the way we teach poetry through a more sophisticated study of metaphor. And I know that's heavy, but I mean, we're talking about poetry, and poetry is heavy, and it's National Poetry Month.
If I could add, to me, one of the important aspects of looking at metaphor is the question of language. We, as a Black poet, one can spend a fair amount of, let me back up. When I say Black poet, I mean, in this instance, a person of African descent who is a poet. I'm not politicizing it beyond that at the moment. So one of the things that you bump up against is your relationship to language, your relationship to English or whatever colonial language informs your history and your family. And so, you know, it can be a noose, or it can be the place in which you keep pressing, that in its imprisoning nature, that you jettison yourself back by pushing against it. Much in the way when we think about Malcolm X in prison and his discovery of words, that we can think of the poet engaging language, a colonial language, and finding a means to jettison past the imprisonment into a territory of empowerment. But that's not an easy battle or challenge. One can find oneself, you know, you dream in a particular language. What does that mean? How does that inform you? How does that impact your identity? And then if you're trying to write in a way that liberates yourself and possibly others, then what is your relationship to language going to be? You know, some of our 50s poets decided glyphs were the answer, but metaphor affords you the opportunity to get into language and find how to bend it, how to expand it, how to make it speak what it doesn't seem like it can speak because of the relationships that you draw through your language. So metaphor, beyond having enormous professional potential in the world, I think it's an answer for the poet seeking to understand, how can I make this colonial language not choke me? How can I make it into something that will free me? So if we're identifying the aspects, the advantages of an HBCU, is surely the presence of Black people of all kinds is tremendously important. But I think being able to engage from our department, language, literature, and cultural studies, those to me are the keys for a poet, for a writer, that you grapple with what language is, you figure out what literature is yours, where do you stand in relationship to some literary tradition, or if you're going to try and rethink literature altogether and move to some sort of orature point of view. And then cultural studies, like what is your relationship to your community, and making that as open a question as possible so that you're not choking someone. Again, I'm using that phrase, I'm thinking about George Floyd today, that you're not choking the person with an obligation, but that you're allowing a student, a young writer to discover, how am I going to be? What is my relationship to the we? Who is my we? How am I going to use my investigation of poetry and my expression of it to contribute to the me and the we? So also really challenging and difficult questions. And I think at an HBCU, and I know for sure at Bowie State, we afford writers the opportunity to ask those questions without having prescribed answers for them.
Okay. Well, I think our viewers, our guests have gotten a sense of what one can expect from an experience at Bowie State University. And I think it's wonderful just to have opened that wonderful the box of exploration. And that's what poetry should do, should afford that opportunity. So we are, because we're so engaged, we are going to extend our forum today another 15 minutes because we don't want to cut short our panelists, Dr. Love and Professor Glover, who have yet to share their first poem. So perhaps as an example of this great metaphor that is being discussed, as well as whatever poems they would care to share. Could we have a poem from each of our panelists to give an example of something that might be discussed from a literary perspective, but just to be enjoyed? Dr. Love and Professor Glover.
I would like to read a poem that I had selected before I had any knowledge of what the earlier poets were going to read. And so it's interesting how it kind of lines up. The poem is called Visitor 9E 117. And it was written in response to my father's dying days in 2021. My father's cellophane body barely holds him together. We listen to Kathleen Battle sing Balm and Gilead in the hospital room overlooking the helicopter pad where the afternoon traffic is steady. He tries to sing. He is singing, but the sound stays inside him, or else I cannot hear him for the copter's descent, or else he sings for company I cannot see, and they hear one another just fine. He has been calling their names, and they have been reaching out like the attendants waiting to take delivery of the souls traveling through the sky to the rooftop circles of possible rescue. Despite the IV tubes and the monitoring cables, his right hand is shaking in the air. I take it in mine and bring it to his heart. He holds it there, surprising me with his strength. When the song is done, his hand returns to its fragile rest. Then it is slim and slams flat foot flugey with the floy, and he is 16, bursting with stories of girls and boxing. He is flowing, but I only know what stories he tells by his smile and the throw of slow punches with his fleshless shoulders. This is our day, the beating of copter blades, songs, and wherever the sounds take him. Days ago, we tired of the back and forth of his muffled laments and my, what, Daddy? What? And agreed to let the sound speak for us and all that we cannot say.
Thank you, Dr. Love. Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful tribute poem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and Professor Glover, what would you care to share at this time?
This is a poem called On Storms and Contradictions. I am not a poet. My father told me so. Never said that I was anything less. Anything more wouldn't sound right. He knew a compliment is half dream, half devil. Feed the ego and it sings hunger louder. So we'd sit in the dark, sometimes looking lonely. Silence bleeds the heart of its contradictions. We were not sad or crying into ourselves. I thought that at first. I didn't know how to listen. Born into that house with its complex math. It's all the same day. Some of us so blind, we think singing a heart that's broken make it heal. He never said he liked it, never said he didn't. You might not think he was listening, but maybe he was, hearing what I couldn't. He told me to watch the storms come in. I looked at the sky, dark and blue, saw the rain come, but still wondered what he meant to say, what nothing was. Maybe that was the point. Maybe he was a storm. Maybe there's some things you just can't sing.
Okay. I definitely appreciate what both of you are sharing today. I want to make sure that, are there events that are available to the community that are sponsored by the department there at Bowie State University that both could introduce persons to the offerings of the school, but also to the creative writing experience. Is there something that perhaps you could post in the chat for our viewers?
And I think right now, I mean, you know, you had asked about events, and you know, I just have a haiku workshop that's coming up in connection with another event sponsored by faculty. We haven't really been heavy on events, you know, and part of that's COVID, you know.
Tell us about the haiku offering. Is it a workshop?
Yeah, it's a workshop. Actually, it's for Japanese Culture Appreciation Day. So we're just tapping in there. But you know, I spent time in China, and the other thing about Dr. Love and I, we have this ongoing spiritual dialogue that centers on meditation and my Tai Chi practice. And so the haiku in particular is very interesting. There's the haiku master, Leonard Moore, that I actually got a chance to meet when I was a student at Bowie State University. But the workshop will be interesting because it will, you know, haiku is a very, you know, it's really a spiritual form, you know?
Yes.
I mean, haiku comes out of Buddhism and meditation, you know? And like right now, spring, like it's haiku time, you know? Like I realized, you know, when you get to a keigo or a season word, you know, I saw the first B of the season and I realized, oh, wow, the first B that comes in spring is like one of those haiku moments, you know? So, again, you know, we'll do a haiku workshop, and I think haiku in particular, especially with some of the meditative energy we have going around Bowie, is a real good example of, you know, something special we bring to the table when we're talking about, you know, writing in that form.
Okay. Well, it's apparent from not just your bio, but your conversation that you have connected with so much relating to the Asian cultural experience. What moved you to live there in China for a period of time and to focus so strongly your writings on this ancient culture, because that is something significant about the Asian culture. It is ancient, and perhaps there is definitely something to be gleaned from such a culture as that.
Yeah, well, you know, and to really be frank, and I mean, you know, I mean, it's a confrontation with the urge for violence, you know. You know, it's like I lose $1 million business, I lose $1 million. And, you know, I mean, that's serious spiritual confrontation. And being a Black man, you know, is even more serious because, you know, the one thing you're not supposed to do is go to jail. So, you know, practicing Tai Chi is the way that, and Asians have that, you know, like Asians have a spiritual practice that though it may get at nonviolence, is well capable of violence.
Right.
And so my practice of Tai Chi is that, and then, you know, my relationship with the Yi Ching it's really about the same thing that poetry is about. That, you know, poetry is about taking human cognition and putting it into words so that it can be used by society. And Tai Chi is about meditation is about engaging human cognition that exists without words. So they sort of pivot on the same principle. One just goes into society, but the other one, in terms of a spiritual journey or the reconciliation of patterns and energies you have in yourself that you don't understand, the other one allows you to experience those forms of cognition and be at one with them, or recognize them, or deal with them, or resolve them. And so that's how I end up in China. And I think, and I have to say this, is I think that we're mad at white supremacy, but we really only have white people. Like maybe if we had some other system that we began to understand that wasn't just white people, we could actually look at it from a different perspective. But how can you look at it from a different perspective when the education and the cognition that you're connected to are the patterns that they've handed down to us, not to react or oppose them? And that's part of the beauty for China. I was there when Trump was elected, and I didn't think about Trump that much. And that freedom right there, very different freedom.
Yeah.
I was not mad. I was not upset at all. And I had things to do. And the other thing is, I felt like I was a learner. Like I wasn't a teacher. Like I felt like I was just able to absorb things. So, and I know you're scared I'm gonna go off cuff on China and do like a 30-minute lecture. But I'm not. I appreciate you, Sister Joy.
Brother Yao, I knew when I invited you that you would be sharing wisdom from an ancient and deep well, and I appreciate all of it. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so very much.
I appreciate you.
Okay. Well, let's see. We've got a few more minutes, and I want to make sure that we give you a chance to light up the mic one more time. Can we get one more poem from each of you? And if there is, let's see, there's a question. Okay, so Dr. Love, thank you for posting in the chat about the haiku workshop dates, which are April 26th, which is April 26th from 2:30 to 3:30. And that's going to be at the in the student center at Bowie State University. If persons who are not students at Bowie State want to attend, would that be permissible, or is it restricted to Bowie State students?
It's not restricted. A person from out of campus may encounter a screening, a COVID screening when they come to the guards gate, but no, it's open to whoever would like to attend.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And okay, so which of you would like to light up that mic first to close us out? Because this is our closing, our swan song for today.
I'm gonna go.
Okay, Dr. Love, it's all yours.
This is a poem for my mother, since I read a poem for my father, and it's called Turai. Turai is an incense that is fabricated in Senegal, and it is intoxicating. It's like a blood color. It's rich and gooey. It's very earthy. And
okay.
Everything about it is earthy. So it's Turai. The bloodshot vessels of Turai, filled with sweetness and flies, rest just beyond my grasp in a small packed stall in the labyrinthine market at Peking. To smell the crimson moist incense is to remember you, your perfumed, oily sweat, your emerald tears, your rain-soaked heart. Mother, in Senegal, 1,000,000 women are you, bearing our sleep-weighted bodies and our poorest dreams. When I lean towards the stewing fragrant pots and the deep juices reach me, I see you, robed in the festival of what God gives, reclaims, and gives again in yet another form. I see you crowned with cashews, oranges, mangoes, and the rose-colored bowls of our peppery ambitions and salt-dried promises. Inhaling, you are here, offering the great platter of our racing, smoky liberation and turning into the sea-lit tamarind morning.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much. And we have a question in the chat about the spelling of that, the title of the poem. Could you put that in the chat for us? Yes. And there's also a question about the workshop. Is it virtual or hybrid or live?
It's live.
Okay. So having cleared the questions, and Professor Glover. Brother Yao.
Okay, and this is a poem. Well, it speaks for itself. It's called "Small Circles, Big Wide World," and it's for Jita Jallo and Brian Gilmore. And one of the interesting things I just have to say this is, if you're down with Pan-Africanism, go to China, because Africans have replaced America as the mother country that they're studying in right now to a certain degree. So I got to be an African. I got to hang with Africans like I was really in a club when I was in China, you know, because they're early. So it's like, if you're in, you know, we talk about how much China is in Africa, but a consequence of that is African leaders are sending their kids to school in China the same way people used to send their kids to America. So the new world is already arrived. You know, I mean, we're on another level. So Jita Jallo is my real African friend that I like hung with, like I hung with dudes here, which is a very unique experience. So this is called Small Circles, Big Wide World for Jita Jallo and Brian Gilmore. The streets of Wuhan look like New York at night. If you ain't never been there, you won't believe me. Maybe Paris or Amsterdam, but not Wuhan. Who ever heard Wuhan, China, city, bright lights, subway? Once I saw the moon rise so bright, I thought about the other side of the world, who I was, what I was looking at, looking for, how far away home is, what I was looking at more than who was looking at me. I come from America, so the staring ain't never bothered me. I've been frisked, so eye frisking don't matter. The 10,000 eyes, I don't really care. Nobody thought I had a gun. I learned to not mind the minding. Where I come from, it's different. Our own American danger. I post up with Jita, a Jallo from the tribe of tribes I'd unheard about, with genes and rage like mine. We Jinjo, Baijo, talk shit, and eat chicken feet on the street. Eat with chopsticks, like Pan-Africanism is more and less than Garvey and Nkrumah and Padmore. In this city, we sing some name that the Chinese don't know. He from Freetown, and I'm from the land of the free. Mm-hmm. Half the folks I know will say this ain't a poem. Africa ain't a country, it's a continent. Cheap wine and cheap cigarettes, lazy Susans, and the paper boxes, ornament of the old empire, and the people coming in from the hills to the skyscraper cities, to Starbucks and Burger King, eat malatang every day, suck some sweet, eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, slurp the wine and say, Gambe, like we say bottoms up. China's bottoms up. The world spins on its axis, flips every day. An African and African-American singing blues across the sea. Jita laugh, and I'm like, it's just you and me. Worlds apart in the world we don't know. Charles Taylor destroyed Freetown. He once stayed on my street in Lanham, Maryland, a city nobody knows, like the Chinese cities, the small towns, like Wuhan. We get drunk and ask what a poem's gotta do with anything. I told Jita I lost my business and my head broke. Jita said, the dogs in Moyan were like the dogs in Freetown. They ate flesh. We all eat flesh, he say. We look each other in the eye and say, my father. Rage, passion, love, red eyes, and the strange music we sing to ourselves when we are drunk or so happy the world will not take us seriously. Those dogs, Jita said, you had to kill them.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Yao. Thank you, Professor Glover. That was truly a Brother Yao poem. And I hope our guests were able to delve as deeply as that poem went. It was quite something. Brother Yao, for persons that want to know, who are the poets that influence you? I know,
Me?
yes, yeah, poets that influence you. And I'm going to ask Dr. Love as well.
I mean, Sekou Sundiata, I have to say is, Sekou Sundiata, and then Baraka, Lucille Clifton. But I mean,
Okay.
really, I mean, everybody, right?
Okay.
I mean, everybody I read.
All right. And Dr. Love, just as a closeout, who influences you?
Gwendolyn Brooks, Lucille Clifton, and Sarah Vaughan.
Oh, Sarah. Okay. Okay. Well, we could go on, but time is such that we must close out today's FOLA. Thank you all, absolutely, Dr. Love and Professor Glover, as well as Dr. Gavin and Professor Aileen, Lauren Aileen. We thank you for all that you have given us today. We are made richer by your gift. And we appreciate so much that you saw it not robbery to be with us today. Today's session was recorded. So as I said, you can request that link. I have put my contact information in the Zoom chat. So you can be in touch with me at the Arts Council web email address or my Sister Joy email address. So that closes us out. We look forward to hearing from you and everyone to please join us tomorrow for our second set of the FOLA series, which will be titled Health and Healing Through Poetry and Art. And if you've registered already, great. If you haven't, you can still register. Please do tell friends about it, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much, and keep writing, always keep writing.